Good afternoon and welcome to Down the Rabbit Hole. Today is Thursday, July 5th, year of our Lord 2018, and you are listening to a Gen Pop Media production. We're broadcasting live from the wonderful CRBradio.com facilities in Redford, Michigan. Before we get started, I want to shout out to a couple organizations that have been wonderful in their support of us. First one is 8911truth.org. Richard Gage and all the folks over there at Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth have been wonderful supporters of ours, and the work they've done, I would say, is probably the number one reason that a lot of people have seen the light on many of these different things going on, but especially on what went down on 9/11. Us here, we have one goal, we have one purpose, and that is to give praise to our Lord Jesus Christ, to bring people, make them aware of what he has done and what he will do and who he is. We're an Ephesians 5:11 ministry here. Look that up, find out what it says. But remember, it's not down the conventional hole. It's down the rabbit hole. Don't trust any one person so that you don't carry someone else's mistakes with you, especially ours. Do your own research. Please don't take anything we say as gospel, unless, of course, we're quoting the gospel. Remember, there are no more secrets, just ignorance. So today on the show, we're going to be discussing, among other things, the protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion, which is a very interesting document or set of documents. It's been a topic we've been playing around with for a while. We decided today it's time to let everybody in on our take on it. So I'm going to real quick turn it over to Hoops and let him tell you what's going on in his world.
Well, that's a whole different show.
That's frightening.
Yeah. Yeah, one day we'll have like a real personal testimony day, but I got to prep for that so I don't sound like a deranged lunatic as if I go through my list of complaints. So has everyone here heard of the protocols of the Learned Elders?
Yeah.
Yep.
I have.
Teresa?
No,
Oh, you haven't?
no.
Oh, good.
We
All right,
kind
then.
of talked about this. It's been a long time, and I remember looking into it back then. So it's been a while, so I hope to learn something from you today.
I read them years ago, and it's creepy. Like my hair was standing up as I was reading them because it is an evil document, and it's almost supernatural. It is a plan to take over the world that was made public in the early 1900s, 1901, 1902, 1903. It was in a book called, in 1900s, this Russian Sergei,
Fedorov?
yeah, close. Yeah, right before the Wings picked him up. Sergei Nihilus. He was a Russian academic. He published a book in 1903, and it was the protocols of the Elders of Zion. And it was meeting notes from a group of international bankers that got together frequently, and they would talk about their plan to take over the world. And these notes got into the hand of a Russian noblewoman, and her name escapes me. She then sold those notes to Sergei Nihilus, who then put them out in a book in 1903. And as is so common, and then that was not in English. In the next next decade or so, it came out in many languages, all of them. And in 1920, it was published here in the United States under the title The Jewish Peril. Now, maybe you guys have heard some of this. Now, this document has helped fuel, not caused, but helped fuel so much anti-Semitism. And we're going to break down why. It kind of ties into some things that's going on today with Q. And we're going to go through a few of these, and I think, Teresa, if you've never heard of this document, it's going to be shocking because the last 100 years have played out exactly as this document said they would back in 1903. And one thing that's interesting, and I've come to realize this, because you hear the protocols of the learned elders, and the first, if you're in the conspiracy genre, you might hear, oh, well, that was a forgery. It was called a forgery. Have you guys ever heard of this?
I remember running across the claim that it was put out as intentional propaganda.
Don't they make that same claim about every document? When it
Yes,
reveals anything?
No, that's what's going
Don't
to.
they say that about the Bible?
In 50 years, they're going to, oh, there was a group of people that thought 9/11 was done by the U.S. government, but
Yeah,
actually,
what nuts they were.
you can see the same thing happens throughout all of history. I mean, it's just been going on. This is how the devil operates, literally. So these meeting notes are from these. Now, at the time, most of these were Europeans. This plan wasn't yet in America, but it talks about its plans for America. And when I show you what was written in 1903, you're going to look at our world and say, wow, that is either this is a miracle accident or there really is a plan and someone's helping us follow it. So the book's translation of the book published in Russia in the early 1900s by Sergei Nihilus, who was a government official who professed to have received from a friend a copy of the summary of the minutes of these secret meetings, which were held in Paris by a Jewish organization. Now, this is where the beginning of the Jewish, the anti-Semitism begins. And this is how, because remember, the enemy that we're up against, the ones that Jesus Christ himself called the synagogue of Satan, that's the group we're talking about. And what did Jesus say about these people? They would pretend to be Jews, but they secretly would be Satan worshipers. And what I think has happened is that this group of documents have been ascribed to all the Jewish people. Like, there are people in my circles that really think this is a quote-unquote a Jewish conspiracy led by Israel and Mossad. 9/11 was part of Mossad and blah, blah. That was a Mossad operation. And they're looking at the world. I mean, they see the conflict in the world, but they think it is drawn along national borders as opposed to idealism. So this Nihilus character, he got these notes from this Russian noblewoman who she claims she bought them from a quote-unquote from a Jew in Paris in the 1880s. So the book that hit the United States was 1920, and it was called The Jewish Peril. And you can find articles going back to 1920. The minute it came out, it was covered in major newspapers, from the Christian Science Monitor to the household name media organizations we know today. And here's a couple of things we know about it, and then I'm going to ask you guys a couple things, and then let's start to go over some of them and just talk about them. So this document's got a lot of different names. Sometimes it's called the Protocols of the Learned Elders, plain and simple. I think that's a more accurate name. There's another name, Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion, which I think that Zion term has been used to associate this with all Jewish people, but we're not talking about regular Jewish people. Again, we're talking about the synagogue of Satan, who have been here all throughout history. They've gone by many names. The Knights Templar, they're come from the Freemasonic societies. This is the Illuminati, the establishment, the elite, the New World Order. These are the guys that want to usher in a one-world government, the very same government that the Bible said Satan would try to impose on earth. It's just unbelievable that here we are 2,000 years later, and it is actually happening. I mean, this is not a conspiracy theory anymore that we are moving towards a one-world government. Are you guys all there? Are you guys with me on this one?
Right, I am.
All right. So, purportedly was written by a secret group of Jews known as the Elders of Zion. Sometimes it's also known as the Protocols of the Meetings of the Learned Elders of Zion. And it includes 24 protocols. Essentially, their plan is a 24-point plan. And we're going to go through those. And the last one, when I read the last one to you, if we get that far, I don't want to plant an idea in your head yet. but just in case, I think the last one when we get there, it's going to sound as if this is the Antichrist that they're ushering in because they need a leader for this one world government. So, let's see here. They were originally printed in 1903 in the Znamia newspaper, and then again in 1905, translated into German, French, English, and they came to be a classic anti-Semitic literature. And right as soon as they came out, this coordinated media basically said these are a forgery, which doesn't really apply because they were anonymous to begin with. But apparently some high-level Jew, the Pharisees, and some Sadducees back in the 1900s go, this is not ours, this is a forgery, which from their perspective I think is true, but I don't think the document itself is a forgery. I mean, I think this document is the backbone of a plan that is unfolding in the world today. It's just one more grain of sand. By itself doesn't mean anything, but taken together with all of the other, not all of it circumstantial, some of it pretty obvious evidence, there's just something more going on in the world than we think. So there was a debunking book written in 1920, and it's interesting because here we are 100 years later, and we hear the same sort of, like people when you debunk Q, you cannot possibly know right now if Q, you don't know enough to debunk him. In fact, it would seem that he is absolutely in the White House, without a doubt. There is something there. And so whenever you hear, do not look over here, my first piece of advice is to look over there. But from this debunking book written in 1920s, this is a quote. The protocols have been proven to be a forgery. Proven to be a forgery. Now, they're writing this in 1920. They don't have the advantage we have, which is we can look back 100 years to see if they really were a forgery. The forgery contains numerous elements typical of what is known in literature as a false document, a document that is deliberately written to fool the reader into believing that what is written is truthful and accurate, though in actuality it is not. It is also one of the best known and most discussed examples of literary forgery, with analysis and proof of its fraudulent origin going as far back as 1921. Well, it actually goes back further than that. The forgery is also an early example of quote-unquote conspiracy theory literature. This is an updated comment. Written in the first person singular, the text embodies generalizations, truisms, and platitudes on how to take over the world, take control of the media and the financial institutions, change the traditional social order, etc. So Henry Ford was asked about this document, and this was on February 17th. A publication called New York World interviewed Henry Ford, asking him, what do you think of these documents? And this is a quote. When told by reporters that the documents were claimed to be a forgery by Jewish leaders, Henry Ford, who was known as somewhat of an anti-Semite, he also sold a hell of a lot of trucks to Hitler, which were used against our own soldiers. So everyone's got kind of dirty hands a little bit. But nonetheless, this is what he said in 1921. Quote, "The only statement I care to make about the protocols is that they fit in with what is going on. They are 16 years old, and they have fitted the world situation up to this time. They fit now." Reporter follow-up question, who are the elders? Henry Ford came back, 300 men, each of whom knows all the others, govern the fate of the European continent, and they elect their successors from their entourage. That number 300 keeps coming up. Isn't there like a table of 300 or the round table? You guys familiar with that?
It comes up a lot.
And how many people own the Federal Reserve? Because it's not federal. It's about 300 individual stockholders that are mostly related to each other, and most of them are European. And then when you dig deep into them, it would seem that most of them, if not all of them, praise Lucifer. I mean, those are serious statements to make, but this shows the fact that what the Bible predicted is unfolding, and we're not all meant to understand it.
Right.
I've had a hard time dealing with that with some people, because some people just will not get it. I know it's a little off topic, but do you guys have friends that you're trying to like wake up that just will not even look? Do you get?
I do, and it's frightening.
Absolutely.
I know it's frightening for some people to think outside the box and to really overview and realize that everything around us has got a little bit of that Luciferian running into it. And with our government and the way things are just being played out on social media, everything is just all tied into it. And so, yes, it is really hard to explain to somebody that everything that's bad in the world is coming off from one source. So, yes.
Well, this book, The Jewish Peril, Hitler used it to justify a lot of the eugenics and the wiping out of the Jews in Germany. The document's supposed to represent 24, and some other versions it's 27 meetings that were held at Basel, Switzerland, through 1897, at the time of the first Zionist Congress. The Jews and Freemasons were said to have made plans to disrupt Christian civilization and erect a world state under their joint rule. Liberalism and socialism were to be the means of subverting Christendom. Do you see that going on today? If subversion failed, all the capitals of Europe were to be sabotaged. Now, the world in 1897 was a pretty Christian place. I mean, the Bible was in everyone's house. Everyone knew it. Kids were educated with the Bible at the center of a kitchen table, not by the state. Presidents routinely referred to Jesus Christ and God. We are a long, long, long way away from that. It's just interesting that one of their plans was to destroy Christendom, which Jesus also said would happen in the last days, too.
Well, when you were talking about friends that just don't see it, I had to look it up because I don't remember where, but it's 2 Corinthians, where it says the God of this age, who's referring to Satan.
Yeah, the God of this age is Satan.
Right, has blinded the minds of unbelievers so they cannot see the light of the gospel that displays the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. So what's that saying is, if they don't believe in God in general, they're not going to see the world the way you see it because they're deliberately blinded. And that obviously reflects that sentiment as well. So,
can you override that, though?
You can't. I can't. No. The only thing that can override that is the Holy Spirit. That's it. So you can't make somebody believe in God.
But he can, I guess, right?
Well, God can do whatever. But
you can keep chipping away. I mean, you can keep showing them the evidence of his presence. But ultimately, in the end, it's the Holy Spirit that...
Yeah, they have to believe. If you don't believe in your heart,
eyes.
then it's not the only place it says something like that. Where, I mean, it's veiled, that the truth is covered up in plain sight.
It is.
It really is.
It's so well...
And the only way you can really see it is through what you believe in your heart.
What if you kidnapped someone, handcuffed them to like a post in your basement, and you came down every day for 3 hours and made them watch?
Well, I think just the act of kidnapping is anti-Christian.
Yeah.
Well, it reminds me of a good
I'm not saying it's a viable plan.
No, it's not actually. It's not actually going to work because it wouldn't be earnest. It would be like, that's why God won't come down here and force you to believe in Him. So it's no different than if you take a little kid and you twist the kid's arm until it hurts and say, "Hey, you tell me you love me." Well, you twist hard enough, the kid will look at you and say, "Okay, fine, I love you." But that kid doesn't really love you. He's only saying that because you're hurting him.
Right.
If you, in your heart, tell God you love Him, that's what He's after. That is your own will, which is it's the free will exercised. So if you actually say in your heart, and you believe it for real, He could obviously he could come here and force everybody to believe. He could just show up, blow everyone's minds, but that's not That's not the deal. That's not how he wants it to work. Otherwise, he would do that. And clearly it's spelled out without question that it's about what you believe. And true belief is all internal. It has to come about from yourself.
So the first good point. And I don't want to get sidetracked by that, but it's just on a personal level, like I know what it means to them, their destiny, for them to be so closed off to this. And like, it just, I've gone from being angry to being selfishly upset, like that's an ego thing, that's personal, to where now it's almost like a sadness. Just I'm like, I don't know what could, I mean, some people are so hard-headed, I just don't know what could ever wake them up. It's tragic in a way.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. I used to get real angry too, but now it's you almost feel pity in a way. Not pity like I'm better than them, just pity like, man, you don't even really know what you're dealing with here, right?
I know. All right, should we get into these?
Do it.
Protocol 1. Now, there was a lot written on these meeting notes. Protocol 1 is basically the overall encompassing strategy and their justification for what they do, the rationalization. And it basically boils down to might makes right, meaning if they're able to do it, then it is okay. If they're able to imprison everyone and the people allow themselves to be imprisoned, then it is okay. If the people allow themselves to be robbed through taxes, then it is okay. I mean, that is what they will push this as far as humanity will accept it. And what have we done in this country? We got to get into the protocols, because when you see the details of the plan, your hair is going to stand up.
That was number one?
Number one, basically it was that right lies in might. Freedom's only an idea. Let's get deeper into these. That just sets the attitude for this group. Is we are going to take over the world unless someone stronger than us stops us. That's it. And if you remember from some of our quote games that we played in the 401 book, I've given you quotes of people that have been in on these meetings going back to the 1800s, 1900s, where they came out saying, I can't disclose the details, but this plan is unstoppable, and it is going to destroy the Catholic Church, and it is going to destroy governments, and it can't be stopped. I mean, those comments were coming out. I don't remember offhand who those were, but maybe I can pull one up later. All right, Protocol 2. It's about economic wars. Now I'm going to read actually some excerpts. Now remember, this is written in the first person because whoever was taking these meeting notes, someone was talking. Now, we don't know the identity of who this was. But here's what was in print in 1903. Quote, "It is indispensable for our purpose that wars, so far as people should not result in territorial gains. War will thus be brought on to the economic ground, where the nations will not fail to perceive in the assistance we give the strength of our predominance. And this state of things will put both sides at the mercy of our international agentur, which possesses millions of eyes ever on the watch and unhampered by any limitations whatsoever." So already in 1900, they're claiming that they've got millions of people in this organization. And I think we've identified that this organization is massive. And they do keep secrets. Let's see, going on. "Our international rights will then wipe out national rights. The New World Government will supersede that of individual nations. The UN wasn't even made yet, people. Our international rights will then wipe out national rights in the proper sense of right and will rule the nations precisely as the civil law of states rule the relations of their subjects among themselves. The administrators whom we shall choose from among the public, with strict regard to their capacities for servile obedience, will not be persons trained in the arts of government and will therefore easily become pawns in our game in the hands of men of learning and genius who will be their advisors, specialists bred and reared from early childhood to rule the affairs of the whole world. Now, these are the people that are behind the presidents. These are the people that give the 100 appointees that this president is going to appoint to. Well, now he's got to appoint someone to the EPA because, surprise, surprise, someone from the EPA, the head administrator from the EPA, another resignation predicted by Q. Interesting. As is well known to you, these specialists of ours, now remember, this is a guy inside of a meeting talking to his other gang members, essentially, but these are suit-wearing, these are the wealthiest people on the planet. He thinks this is a private, they don't expect these documents to get out. Or, very much, or very possibly what could be the case is, they did want them to get out, but have them get out and be blamed on the Jews, which will later on fulfill one of their desires in setting up a state of Israel, which, yes, God did predict would happen. He didn't necessarily say, I'm going to be behind Israel. In fact, he said, Israel will come together, and it'll come back together not in spirit, not believing that my son was the Messiah. But when all is said and done, they will believe that. So, as is well known to you, these specialists of ours have been drawing to fit them for rule the information they need from our political plans, from the lessons of history, from observations made of the events of every moment as it passes. The goyim, which is basically another word for, you might call it the useless eaters, the Gentiles. It's not like it's not a compliment. Okay, it's like I'm Colombian. We call Americans gringos. You know, it's cute, funny, but in this PC world, that's a word I wouldn't throw around so much. Anyhow, the goyim are not guided by practical use of unprejudiced historical observation, but by theoretical routine without any critical regard for consequent results. And don't we do that now? We just follow tradition. We don't even ask why. Oh, I'm a Democrat? Well, because my parents were Democrats. I'm a Christian because, I'm a Baptist because my parents were Baptists. Do you understand? That's really all we are. And if anyone in your bloodline made some theological error somewhere along, and you're just carrying it forward, starting to see how now the devil is close to gaining the whole world. I mean, he has had so long to plant ideas that can terminate your relationship with God. And with many people, I think we were just kind of talking about some of them, they're already so certain that there is no God whatsoever, they will not even bother to look in this book, which worked on me for 40-plus years, 42 years. The goyim are not guided by practical use of unpredicted historical observations, but by theoretical routine. We need not, therefore, take any account of them. We don't need to worry about them. Let them amuse themselves until the hour strikes. Kind of scary. Or let them live on hopes of new forms of enterprising pastime, or on the memories of all they have enjoyed. And enterprising pastime, because how much time does the average person, I mean, the minute we get home from work, what's the first thing most people do? What comes to your mind?
Turn the TV on.
Turn on the TV.
And then
go
Get
online or
sucked
whatever.
in, and then get sucked in.
And that could easily be the next. So now you're watching a menu of shows that were put together by this very same cabal that we're reading about in 1900. This is now just their grandchildren that are doing it, that are in control. You've got, it seems like we've got a lot of choice, but you got to understand that probably 99% of everything that is on your cable television works to deceive. And they don't care what movie you choose, but there are certain movies you will never find on your cable television.
Yeah.
I mean, why are there... How many Batman and Superman movies are there?
Lots.
Cartoons.
Many.
Do you find it odd that Superman, who's this hybrid creature, he's half alien, he's half God, half man, right? Raised on Earth. You understand, he is the personification of the Antichrist. He saves the world. He unites the world. I mean, these are the cartoons that we start watching as kids. And you compare how much media attention is put on that versus the most incredible story ever, which is God, the creation of earth, and then the resurrection and the saving of this contaminated race of people, which God could have just let go. And sometimes I don't know why he didn't, but
That's
I
why they
probably
called it,
would have.
programming, TV programs, because that's exactly what it's doing.
Yeah, exactly. It is a program.
Well, it says in there, let them amuse themselves. That's interesting because I'm not dogging sports because there's some sports I like. I know you're a football guy, but really, how much time is spent by people just watching sports? And that is an enterprising pastime for some folks because, boy, there's a lot of money in sports. Big time.
Just as a hobby, all my free, up until 8 years ago, pretty much all of my free time was invested into following my Michigan Wolverines. I could tell you the score of every Super Bowl, every starting quarterback of this. I knew football and statistics like I'm now trying to get to know the Bible. But I'd found a way to occupy myself with inanities for my whole life. I mean,
it's really a modern version of the Roman circus.
Exactly. And God said that Rome would never be conquered, that it would go underground, it would go hidden, which I think we've now discovered where exactly it is. And, it's not an accident that people that are associated with the Illuminati are sports owners. I mean, they own sports franchises.
Right.
In fact, those are one of those things, like, I don't think you can get there. In most cases, I don't think it's a patent observation, but...
There's a lot of symbolism with the halftime shows.
Oh, and
with football.
right.
Madonna was just so obvious.
Madonna?
Yes.
Oh, she did that little, she
Luciferian.
replayed the story of Mithra. Go look that up.
Yeah.
And every halftime show is, it's just soaking with demonism if you look at it closely, if you understand.
I remember that Maserati Super Bowl ad that you brought to our attention.
It's still creepy.
It's just so creepy. It just
Oh,
blew
right.
my mind.
Yeah, it's still creepy.
Oh,
Yeah.
and they throw it at you all the time. Mercedes came out with a Super Bowl ad that had that black Doberman, and who was the actor? Ironically, it was an actor that had played Jesus Christ in The Last Temptation of Christ. What's his name?
He was in
Willem Dafoe?
Willem
Person of
Dafoe. Yeah,
Interest.
Willem Dafoe.
Oh,
And Willem Dafoe, obviously Willem's playing Satan, and his eyes go reptilian there for a second. They just flaunt this in our face, and it's hard to watch some of the dingleberries in this. Just have it go right over their head.
That's just a commercial, Dave. Come on.
The thing is, I was there because I was them watching that and going and having someone go to me, dude, man, you should be careful. I'm like, really?
Yeah.
I need to be careful.
I think once you're awake, everything you watch on a movie, TV, video, it's just you start noticing these things so much more. I really can't watch too much on television anymore without just seeing all of it play out.
Yeah, agreed. Like, I look at it so differently now.
Yeah.
It's just what was good is now bad, and what was bad is now good.
Exactly.
And all these factions that are fighting in this world, and there's so many of them, whether it's blacks and whites, Christians and Jews, or Republicans or Democrats, both sides think they're right. Like my friend, and she could be right. I think the difference is I recognize this, but she assumes that Trump is ushering in hell, Satan. And I think that it's possible that the exact opposite is the case. Although the more I ruminate on it, the more I think that Q is just being used to usher in the Antichrist, but we'll talk about that later. Okay, so the second protocol was economic wars, and we're going to put people in positions of power that they're just greedy, and they're not too smart, and they'll do whatever we say to have the spotlight on them. Which, does that describe any of our politicians?
Just about all of
I
them.
think all of them.
Okay. Protocol 3, are we ready? Methods of conquest. Here's another hint to what backs them up. The symbolic snake and its significance. The instability of the constitutional scales. Terror in high places. Power and ambition. These are what some of this is about. The secret of the science of the structure of society. These are the things that they're going to be keeping. This is how they're going to This is how they're going to take over the world. Now, here's a quote from these meetings. This is Protocol 3. Today, I may tell you that our goal is now only a few steps off. There remains a small space to cross, and the whole long path we have trodden is ready now to close its cycle of the symbolic snake, by which we symbolize our people. They are symbolized by the snake. Well, does anyone know any famous snakes in history? The constitutional scales of these days will shortly break down, for we have established them with a certain lack of accurate balance, in order that they may oscillate incessantly until they wear through the pivot on which they turn. The Goyim are under the impression that they have welded them sufficiently strong, and they have all along kept on expecting that the scales would come into equilibrium. But the pivots, the kings on their thrones, or presidents, are hemmed in by their representatives, who play the fool, distraught with their own uncontrolled and irresponsible power. So there's, again, something else we see playing out today. And this is how you see this playing against Trump. The laws of this country conflict on so many levels. And so, yes, at any particular time, something like some children may be being separated from their families at a border. Which, by the way, folks, the media screams something, and next thing you know, the parrots, they parrot it. And it seems like this group of people that are just incensed over the fact that they make it sound as if Trump himself ordered that these kids be separated from their families.
Right.
I had another guy say that, the evil Republican family killers or something like that. I'm just like, well, I don't know if I would ascribe it to just Republicans. But that this was a law enacted by Bill Clinton, and during the Obama administration, there wasn't not a peep about it.
No.
And let's think about this for a second. A child comes over with a parent. They're crossing a border. And this is an act that has legal implications on their life, okay? Now, if you're a parent today and you commit a crime, or you do something, you embezzle some money or something like that, are you separated from your child?
Yes.
Should we not maybe be having protests about parents being separated from their children that have to go to a prison facility? I mean, you can't take your kid to prison, right?
Right. And I guess people expect some sort of special housing that they all can be housed together and imprisoned. And
if it's
it
really
can't
about the
happen.
kids, then you should also be you should be incensed about the fact that parents that have been sentenced to prison are separated from their families.
Right.
So this to me is an example of no matter what a president does, he can't win. This is why the media, as Malcolm X said, is the most powerful entity on earth. And Trump is combating it on many levels, and I've been impressed to date. But there are people in my life that think that he's truly evil. And he may be, but not for the reasons they believe. Because he's just a victim himself of this whole border crossing scenario. Do you guys have any thoughts about that?
I have lots of thoughts on this. And I've been trying to learn as much as I can, because what I don't want to do, especially with this circumstance, what's going on at the border, is bite the baited hook, because there's a whole lot of baited hooks being cast out.
Nor do I want to do it with Q either. He could also be bait.
Dude, I think all the bait's on hooks at this point. So I'm really cautious with it. And I'll also be intellectually honest and say I have no idea, and neither does anybody else who's mouthing off about what's going on at the border, what's actually going on at the border. You want to know why? Because I'm not there. So there's no way I can even really know. And I'm not going to sit there with a bullhorn and say this, and this is happening because I read it in the Washington Post, right? It may be it's going on, But you have to at least be honest about it and say, we don't really know, so let's see what it is that is
Well, what do
going
you
on.
say when someone goes, well, it was the Washington Post? I mean, come on.
Well,
they're so reputable.
That's what I just say is like,
Yeah.
well, they're not reputable, actually, and either is any media outlet for that matter.
I agree.
And that includes all of them, by the way. So there's not one you can go to and trust 100%. There just isn't any. So I don't really know. I'm trying to figure it out right now, actually. I have some friends that are really, really on this, and some people are... I think people just don't really understand what's going on down there. And if it's true, and I say if because I don't know enough to say for sure that this is what's going on. But if this is what's going on, in other words, this policy that they've enacted, where they're separating families as a punitive measure to stop people from applying for asylum, then it's wrong, and it's not the way we do things. But I don't know if that's really what's going on. There's a lot of people trumpeting that, no pun intended there, but you know, they're with the bullhorn saying this is just being done, and they may be right. That may be what's going on. It may be mean-spirited thing to try to prevent people from seeking asylum. But I have some very valid questions that aren't answered yet, and I don't know if anyone can answer these questions yet. But the claim is that children are being separated from their families. So we have to take a step back, calm down, and stop emotional, knee-jerk reactions and ask some very, very important questions that need answers. Number one is, are these children really with their families? Are they really relatives? Do we even know?
Well, a lot of human trafficking comes across
That's-
that border, and you don't really know.
I
A
don't
dude
know.
shows up with a kid, and this is like an infant who can't even talk. Now, he's been paid in some cases, I mean, we know this, to literally bring a body across a border, which is going to get into our adoption system. And see, the one thing you said is that, well, I'm not there.
I don't know.
But even if you were there, one thing we need to understand about the way our society works now is this happens all over the place. We focus on specialization and compartmentalization, meaning no more, you're not encouraged anymore to study, for instance, philosophy, which is to study a little bit of everything when you graduate high school. Where are we being pushed? To learn technical skills, to become a biologist or a welder or a computer scientist. We are dissuaded from looking into the history of the world, really, and we are incentivized to focus on a marketable skill and to get that done as soon as possible. So we're very specialized. The guys that we call the smartest guys, the guys that wear lab coats that maybe are interviewed about some breakthrough in genetic biology, for instance, like we're sitting here, we're taught to think, they are the smartest people of all time. No, they're just highly educated, and they're only highly educated on this one little topic. But you go and ask that scientist about the history of war or whether God exists or other philosophical questions, they are just as naive and ignorant as the rest of us. So don't get fooled by these outward, these.
Yeah, I just don't know enough to go out there and hold a sign and claim that I know, which is going on a lot. And because I don't know. But if that is what's happening, all right, let's say a mother shows up with her 2 toddlers and escaping something in Guatemala and gets to the border seeking asylum, then there is a proper way to handle that. The proper way to handle it is not by ripping the kids out of her arms, throwing her over here, and then taking the kids wherever and barcoding everybody. It's not how we do it.
But it was never like that. All that happens is when these families are getting processed, there's just a different set of rules for the kids. And after 20 days, they're not allowed to be in this facility anymore by a law that was passed in a different democratic administration.
Yeah, I get it.
But I'm not into. There's not Republican versus Democrats in
No,
this.
that's the point I'm trying to make. Is nobody really knows what's going on down there.
They don't. And even the people involved don't know.
They don't really know.
And let me explain how that works. And I've had a friend of mine explain this to me very clearly who's in the FBI. Because whether you're an FBI agent or almost any policing agent, whether you're a federal prosecutor, his wife happens to be a federal prosecutor, dear friend of mine, they take oaths. You understand? They take an oath on a Bible of secrecy. So even if, theoretically, now I think the bond of a marriage is more than the bond of governmental secrecy.
It's supposed to be.
But we've seen it in movies where husband and wife both work for the government, and they keep their vow of secrecy. It is so pristine, it is held in such high regard that they will not even share with each other what it is they know. Well, this is one of the ways that evil operates, is they keep people from comparing notes. They certainly would never put it on the media.
Would you share? If you and your wife were both government agents, would you tell her?
Yeah.
I would too. Without
Yeah.
hesitation. My
Yeah.
wife is many things. She has proven absolutely trustworthy when it comes to information over 15 years.
Yeah. But the threat is what keeps people from
Exactly.
you
And
know,
remember,
dispelling the information because
And I think that's why they portray it that
They would
way
be
so
locked
many
up
times
forever.
on television, where you've got a husband in one branch. I can't. It's privilege. I can't tell you that.
Right.
It's crap.
Well,
right,
they-
no.
If you've got a solid relationship, I tell my wife everything.
Yeah, I mean,
and
they
she
throw-
tells me everything. It's
they
the way it
would-
is.
They throw espionage in your face, and
Yeah.
use the word
And that's-
traitor gets thrown around. And
that's
you get,
one of those things
get locked
that
up forever.
there are three things. I'm going to add a third. You can accuse someone of, and it doesn't matter if they're guilty or not. They are guilty in the court of public opinion. Molesting children, beating women, and treason. I'm throwing that one in there. And the thing is most of the secrets that these people keep, my friends didn't tell me what the secrets were, but they teased me about them. Like, if you only knew what we know and can't release to the public. And that was before I'd stumbled onto all this stuff, and I'm just going, really? Like, wow. Now I think I know exactly what they're talking about, because they are witnesses to some real ugly stuff, maybe even related to what's going on at a border somewhere, but they're not allowed to talk about it because they've taken an oath. And if they break that oath, they're labeled, you're hurting our national security. i.e., you're hurting everyone.
Well, you're a criminal.
It turns the masses against you instantaneously.
You go to prison. You get charged with a crime, a high-level federal crime, and get prosecuted and get locked away forever.
Well, I hear
Or
you
in
can
some
get. I hear you
cases
can get away
have
with
an
emailing that
accident.
stuff.
It depends on who you are, who you know.
Yeah.
All right, let's try and get
So-
to two more Any other comments on the last protocol, which was the methods of conquest? Now, there's a lot more to these. I mean, this is a thick book, all right? We're just giving you some highlights here. Are we ready for Protocol 4?
Let's hear it.
Bring it.
Protocol 4, materialism to replace religion.
Check.
Check.
Quote out of the book. Every republic passes through several stages. The first of these is compromise in the early days of mad raging by the blind mob, tossed hither and thither, right and left. The second is demagogy. Does anyone know what that is?
No.
Can someone look up that word? I want to be sure. This has something to do with, I think, a single god, but let's...
No.
And I want to make sure that's
If
not
you're
supposed to be
It's kinda
demagoguery.
idols, right?
you're-
It's false idols, right?
No, if you're a demagogue, it's somebody who is
Who voted against Trump?
is somebody who, let's say you're on the podium on TV and you're spouting your ideology, even if it's false, right? It's like you're. There's a better definition than that, but it doesn't have anything to do with religion.
Okay, so the stages of a republic, from which is born, so from demagogy comes anarchy, and that leads inevitably to despotism. Not any longer legal and overt, and therefore responsible despotism, but to unseen and secretly hidden, yet nonetheless sensible, felt despotism in the hands of some secret organization or other, whose acts are the more unscrupulous inasmuch as it works behind a screen, behind the backs of all sorts of agents, the charging of whom not only does not injuriously affect but actually aids the secret force by saving it, thanks to continual changes from the necessity of expending its resources on the rewarding of long services. Who and what is in a position to overthrow an invisible force? And this is precisely what our force is. Gentile masonry blindly serves as a screen for us and our objects. But the plan of action of our force, even its very abiding place, remains for the whole people an unknown mystery.
Wow.
Does that sound right?
Yeah.
Well, you can
Your
expound on that.
demagogy is G-O-G-Y?
That's how it's spelled here, yeah.
Okay, according to the American Heritage Dictionary of the English Language, it is the character or practices of a demagogue, semicolon, demagoguery.
Yeah, look up demagogue.
All right, so like an Anthony Robbins might be a demagogue. The Antichrist would certainly be an...
Okay.
All right, we got it. It's just a minor point in there. The point is that...
Okay, a demagogue is a political leader who seeks support by appealing to popular desires and prejudices rather than by using rational argument.
Got it.
So
So they could just say, look up Clinton campaign.
anything.
Any
look
one of
up,
them.
honestly, look up the Trump campaign too.
So
that applies to all of them, by the way.
Do you think, okay, I don't mean to hijack this, but let me ask a question because I was having this discussion with someone the other day in regards to Trump.
Yeah.
And the accusation of demagoguery, okay? Do you think that Trump has changed people's opinions on certain subjects, or do you think that people opinions have changed on Trump? Okay, let me word that better. What they're talking about,
the latter.
what they're saying is that, Trump has turned all these people into racists and this and this and that. And what I'm saying is I think what's happened is that a lot of people that were right of center, that there were a lot of qualities that Trump exhibited and a lot of policy that we agreed with. And I think many people who need to blindly follow a leader basically started to conform to the other Trump-isms because they thought that was the way to be Trump, support Trump. You understand what I'm saying? I'm really wording it poorly.
Well, I mean, I'll just kind of summarize it real quick like this. So, and this is just one example, maybe a bad example, but it's one I can think of off the top of my head. So, as far as being a demagogue, you just appeal to people's desires. So, or their opinions. It doesn't really matter. You're not trying to change people's opinions. Just appeal to it, right? You're just trying to, whatever the opinion is. So a good example of this, and whether you agree with this or not, doesn't really matter for the purpose of this illustration. And I can't prove that he actually tweeted it himself, but it's from his Twitter feed where he used the term, and I'm going to swear, so sorry about the kids' ears, but where he referred to these places as shithole countries. Now, whether or not you think that's true,
Define shithole.
it doesn't matter. The point I'm trying to make is that does appeal to people who think that way, and it's irresponsible for a leader in his position to talk like that.
Absolutely.
And that's demagoguery. That's being
Gotcha.
a demagogue.
Okay.
Because now you've just excited all these people and you got their support, and you don't care how you get it.
Right.
You don't care how you get it.
It's like him taking too long to denounce white supremacists while he was campaigning.
Like he should have done that right out of the gate.
I mean, it should have been
But
immediate.
again, and shame on him, he wants those votes too.
Oh yeah.
So and
I got news. They weren't voting for the left to begin with.
again, it's just it's an example.
They weren't going libertarian either.
Of what that is, right? So you could go out there and but they're all guilty of it. All of them are guilty.
Right.
Of it.
I get it.
So
I
forget
get
the
it.
facts. Forget what's best for the country. Let's just let's make people feel good. Think that I agree with everybody at the same time to get the votes. That's demagogue. That's being a demagogue, and it's irresponsible. And you see now what it's caused. Dangerous stuff, man.
Let's try and get through one more protocol
Do it.
before we go to Teresa's segment.
Yeah, Teresa's Q update.
So the last protocol to summarize is they're going to operate in secret, and as governments and administrations and politicians change over, they will always be there secretly pulling strings, and no one's ever going to get hip to them, which ties right in with a quote of Adam Weishaupt saying, we will never operate under our own banner. We'll always operate under someone else's. Now, they've mentioned Masonry here several times. And certainly, Masons are one of the arms of the Illuminati because these dopes go in, they join a lodge, they make an oath, and every year they get passed, frequently they get passed on to the next degree. And as long as they're willing to do the dare, whatever it is, they keep progressing forward. We've thrown out the example of, I think the 9th degree of Freemasonry or 10th or something like that is, are you willing to spit on the cross of Jesus Christ? Now, the Mason who's in there, no matter what he does, whether he spits on the cross or not, he's told, good job, you passed. So he feels good. But if he didn't spit on Jesus Christ's cross, he's not going very far in Masonry. The person who did spit on the cross gets moved up, gets more business connections, gets more money, gets a little more popular. And that keeps happening. And they make a new oath every time. And they don't even know what they're making an oath to. But they're making an oath to keep something secret and to put ourselves above everything. Above your country, above your family, above your friends. So if we say you need to go kill your aunt, you do it. Literally, that is how these guys operate. And if you break the rules, you know what they do. It's blood in, blood out. I mean, once you're in, you are flirting with danger. Anyone out there is thinking about joining a Masonic society or any kind of group like that? Yes, on the outside, everything's going to look great, and you may not even realize what is going on for many years, maybe ever. But the ones that have advanced, that are into that 29th, 28th, 29th, 30th, 31st, etc. degree, by now these people know they're worshiping, literally, Lucifer. But for them, it's too late, though. I mean, they may think it's too late, but it might not really be too late, but they think it's too late. Anyway, let's get through one more protocol, and then we're going to Teresa. So Protocol 5, despotism. Despotism in modern progress. Here's the quote. It basically is about creating an intensified central government above all governments. Quote, we shall create an intensified centralization of government in order to grip in our hands all the forces of the community. We shall regulate mechanically all the actions of the political life of our subjects by new laws. These laws will withdraw one by one all the indulgences and liberties which have been permitted by the Goyim, and our kingdom will be distinguished by a despotism of such magnificent proportions as to be at any moment and in every place in a position to wipe out any Goyim who oppose us by deed or word. Basically, they're saying, anyone that opposes us, we will kill you. And we are that powerful. You can't protect yourself. But there is protection. We'll explain that in a minute. Moreover, the art of deflecting masses and individuals by means of cleverly manipulated theory and verbiage, misogynistic, xenophobic.
Interesting.
You see it? Moreover, the art of deflecting masses and individuals by means of cleverly manipulated theory and verbiage, by regulations of life in common and all sorts of other quirks, in all which the Goyim, again, that's us, understand nothing, belongs likewise to the specialists of our administrative brain, reared on analysis, observation, on delicacies of fine calculation. In the species of skill, we have no rivals. Meaning that these families, these people raise kids from childhood to be, like, they know who the president is going to be. Kathy O'Brien, who was in the White House under old George Bush, okay? So we still needed to go. Oh, no. She was in the Reagan White House. She already knew Bill Clinton was going to be president in the 1980s. Think about that. someone, it seems, knew Barack Obama was going to be president, too. Reared on analysis, observation, delicacy, and blah, 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 blah. In this respect, the Jesuits alone might have compared with us. So it sounds like at one point these are... And Satan will do this. We think that they're a unified kingdom. They are not. Satan uses interbattles even between demons. When Greek mythology talks about how these demigods were fighting with each other, I suspect that that was more real. And if in Satan's kingdom you can show the power to be over other demons, you will get that label. You will be an authority over principalities, over powers which are lower ranked. I suspect that's a possibility. But it seems that he does have his cohorts in competition with each other. Like Donald Trump, if he's part of this cabal, might be thinking, I'm really going to let America win this worldwide war. Putin could be thinking the same thing. It's not like Putin and Trump are aligned, but they're both answering to the same master. It's kind of like two NFL football teams. When the Lions play the Chicago Bears, the guys on the Lions are against the guys on the Bears. But at the end of the day, they're all part of the same organization. Behind the scenes, they're united, and they're friends behind the scenes, kind of like wrestling is. And he will play people off each other. There is internal competition. Blah, 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 but we have contrived to discredit them. This is the Jesuits. He's saying that these guys are on par with us. Now, I think since then they have enveloped the Jesuits, not vice versa. The Jesuits are studs at this, but we have contrived to discredit them in the eyes of the unthinking mob as an overt organization, while we ourselves, all the while, have kept our secret organization in the shade. However, it is probably all the same to the world who is its sovereign lord, whether the head of Catholicism or our despot of the blood of Zion, basically our leader from our bloodline. Antichrist. But to us, the chosen people, it is very far from being a matter of indifference. The chosen people. Remember, these are not people chosen by God. These are people that were chosen by Satan. Satan counterfeited that, adopted it from the Bible. And these people do believe that they are chosen to lead the world into a peaceful future, into a transcendence of sort, into the new age, the new world order. And most of them really believe they're doing this for good. And believe it or not, many of them believe that Lucifer is a good god that is simply misunderstood, and he's the real strength in the world, not Jesus Christ, which makes for a very interesting play out of what's going to be happening here in the future. That gets us through the fifth protocol. Any thoughts, any comments before we shift?
Not for me, not yet. Yeah.
All right, now, Teresa, you've got a segment you're going to do for us?
Yes, real briefly.
Tell us about it.
Good evening, everyone. And to some of us that have not watched our show before and know what Q is, I'm going to explain a little bit briefly. Q is a White House hacker that's pretty much gotten information that is very difficult to obtain and has been very accurate since October of last year of reporting different things that should be happening in the future. And he usually broadcasts something, I should say he puts it out on the internet once a day. And it's been astounding how accurate it is. And little by little, it's been the impression that this is someone that's being allowed to do this through the White House somehow, and that it seems to be some sort of Trump supporter. And it goes on from day to day, and it's been very helpful to understand what's really been going on with the politics and the court hearings. And there was a post from yesterday, and it pretty much said that I'm off to save the world, aren't you coming? And it was a picture of Trump entering onto a plane to leave. And what was mentioned by Q was, for years, schools worked alongside another Justice Department mainstay. David Margolis, who was known as Yoda of the department when Margolis died. DOG brass asked schools to come back to Washington to fill those shoes. Did they try to follow? They will. Everything has meaning, and that was all Q had wrote. So I want to let you know a little bit about Scott Schools. He's a topside deputy attorney general and is planning on leaving the Justice Department at the end of the week. According to two people familiar with this decision, the job title for Schools, Associated Deputy Attorney General, believed to be importance as a strategic counselor and repository of the international memory and ethics of the DOJ. So there's so much that has been going on with the White House and these hearings, and a lot of these hackers like Julian Assange and Snowden and, of course, Q have been bringing things out to the surface that people normally don't hear. And we need to. And so it's a blessing that these people are able to do what they're doing and inform everyone, because there's so much corruption that is just stemming from one party to the other, and it's just so vast, and it's going right through to making Trump look like he's corrupted himself when he hasn't been. And so, well, I'm really anxious to see what the next coming weeks are going to be bringing. And I'd like to bring up a couple of things that happened I noticed in the media this week. And it was with the immigration, something we were just talking about. And it was a church that was in Indiana, and they used the depiction of the baby Jesus with Mary, and they put it in a cage to show their protest against the immigration and what had went on. And to me, that upset me, because they used the image of Christ to promote the anger that they had going on about the immigration and their issues with politics. And I'm seeing this an awful lot now, and it's just really pushing a negative thing towards the views of the church. And I see the government evolving itself with church and religion, not allowing kids to pray in schools. I had a girlfriend, her little boy, he had some pamphlets in his little bag from church, and he brought it to his school, and at lunchtime, he passed it out to a couple of the classmates. So even though he's in elementary school, they suspended him for it. And, you know, he's too little to really understand why was it a bad thing that he was doing. He thought he was doing something good. And so it upsets me that I see so much of this now, because we were allowed to when I was kids, and I don't really see anything wrong with it. And I don't like that our government's involving itself with religion, and I don't like that religion is using their views and their agenda to go against politics by using the symbolisms of God and other things. And I see just this constant war against religion everywhere I go. They're making crosses go down in parks, on churches. We're not allowed to have the manger out at Christmas. We're not allowed to celebrate holidays in schools anymore, Easter, whatnot. And it's just such a dividing thing that it's really become such a negative thing anymore. And so my opinion is that I really think we should urge the churches not to involve itself so much in politics. I believe they can have their opinions, the people that are there, and possibly help with the immigrants and that, but I don't see it as something we want to put out in the church. I want people, when they drive by a church, to think that it's a peaceful place that they can go to get their answers for what troubles them, and not be confronted with politics issues and things like that by looking at it. And because it's just pushing everyone away from religion these days, is that there's so much going into this dogma. So what I urge everybody is to let's keep religion separate from politics. And we have David back.
Good point. So I heard the beginning. I had to step out for a minute. You said that you thought Q was a hacker. Do you think he's hacking the government, or do you think he's with?
I think he's actually somehow hacking into files, but I think someone is overlooking it in some way, because it seems like there was a picture that he posted recently, and it was a picture of Hong Kong, and it was a white gentleman that was walking in the city. Well, I looked at it closer because he doesn't tell you who it is, and it's Prince Harry. It really looks like Prince Harry. So my opinion is that somehow he's getting these pictures from possibly some White House files, maybe some investigation that's going on that we don't know about with the mainstream media. I can't explain it, but he does that a lot. He seems to get these pictures, and he leaves it up to you to kind of the subtle information that he gives you to figure it out for yourself. And so my opinion is that somehow he's getting these pictures, and I think they're from the White House.
A lot of people think that he is actually inside the White House, and that's why it goes by the name Q, which means that he has Q clearance, which is the highest level of clearance you can get.
Yeah, that's the explanation that I've got.
And there have been so many what are called Q proofs, and you can go to a website called Q proofs, and there's probably over 100 of them now. But ones where Donald Trump himself has, in a sense, authenticated Q, there is no doubt in my mind that they are working together in some way. Now, whether it is for good or evil,
I was just going to say that.
we don't know.
Yeah.
But he will echo an exact same phrase that Q put out. So Q puts out a phrase in the day and says something like, check in 2 hours. The president's giving a press conference, and exactly, in 2 hours, the president says this exact same phrase, and he makes a Q sign. He's always going and pointing to the person. I mean, Trump obviously knows who Q is. Now, if you believe Q, what they've done is there is some hacking going on, but they're hacking the actual phones, essentially, of the Illuminati. They're using their own pictures, because Q is really not talking to the American public so much. He's leading, but half of his conversation is directed at the enemy, saying, we know what you did.
Yeah.
We're everywhere. We're going to uncover you. You're going to get found out. And it's almost a brilliant sidestepping of the mainstream media, which would never cover this because, frankly, they're somewhat complicit in it.
Yeah.
The same way they will not cover 9/11, because they are somewhat complicit in it. Not every single reporter, but again, I've been the CEO of several businesses. I can control everyone
Right.
from the top, and I don't even need to say it to them directly. Like, if I don't want a message in my company, the person's out, or I shut them down. So you only need that guy at the top, which is why this plan is so dastardly, because the way we elect, we have a vote for a president. Great. There's usually 2 names on a ballot, so we quote-unquote have freedom. North Korea has 1 name on a ballot. We laugh at them. We have 2. We got to figure it out. So we might vote on a president, and then what does a president do? He turns around, and the real power in the world are the hundreds of appointments he makes to judgeships, to the head of the EPA, the Secretary of Education, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the people that get appointed, sometimes you need to get a congressional, you have to be bestowed by Congress, so you have to be approved by them. But in general, these are rubber stamps. They're layups. And then you get your cabal members. I mean, there were millions of them in 1900.
Right.
Millions of them. If they all grow up and have 2.3 children, and then there's maybe another generation of 2.3, and then even another generation. So you've got, if it was 1 million in 1900, we're talking now 8 million because you got a qubit. And that's a powerful force. And that's a lot of people. And this isn't just America. This is global. And there are a lot of people that work for these organizations that really don't know what they're really doing. Like some of the Lockheed contractors that are in phone rooms and computer sweat boxes working social media accounts.
Which is weird because they're supposed to make airplanes and helicopters and stuff like that.
That's what they're supposed. They're the biggest government contractor.
Huge.
And
So
that's what a lot of our black budget dollars go to. You're literally spending money on subverting yourself.
Yeah, so if we did a quick survey, because we're talking about Q, if someone were to ask Teresa, someone asked you right now if you think Q is good or evil, what would be your answer?
Mine would be Q, is very good, because we have to know these things that he's bringing out. He, she, it.
Okay, so your answer is that you think Q is good. A force
Yes.
is good. Dave, what do you say? What was your answer to that?
The jury is out. He's not going to be average. This is either of God or of Satan.
So your answer is you don't know.
We don't know, but it's worth following this story.
Jay?
Some weeks I get the best feeling in the world from it, and other weeks I just look at it and I just feel like it's too perfect. My thing with it is I don't know how it fits in the Bible. I can't figure that out.
So you don't know.
So I just don't know, man.
Howard?
I'm pretty much with Hooper. This has been my concern all along, is that when the Q craze started and everybody started jumping on the bandwagon, it's Trump, and going with all that stuff, it's obviously someone who's well connected, okay? And my concern is that we've seen these things play out. We can look back over history and see these deceptions and covert operations play out. And my concern is that Q is going to give us just enough information to prove his credibility, to where we're buying it. Because a lot of the things that are coming out, it's easy. It's not like Nostradamus connecting the dots. I mean, it's pretty easy to see. He says something's going to happen on the 23rd, and I'm paraphrasing. I don't know if that was actually a date, but and then something happens on the 23rd, and he gives you enough clues that it's not much of a stretch to realize that's what he's talking about. Okay, my concern with Q is right now he has given us a ton of interesting information before it became public, and it's almost always come out the way he said it would come out. My concern is that he's going to tell us the truth right up until the point he puts in the lie. And you're going to get enough people that are following him that are just on the fringes of what we're into, of what we look at. And they're like, oh, yeah, no. He's totally accurate. And then all of a sudden, Q's going to tweet, God's actually an alien. and then and in 3 days he'll reveal himself, and then in 3 days there's gonna be someone landing going doing what Dave Hooper said all along. Oh, you all had it a little right. I mean, you were seeded from us a few 100,000 years ago. You're an ant farm for us, and now that you've evolved in your morality. Now that you're cultivated, we can take you to a higher level.
Yeah, transcendence, right?
Yeah, transcendence, and that is my concern. So far, if it stops now, I think Q's pretty solid.
Yeah.
But we're not going to know until the end.
Yeah.
What do you think about Q?
My concern is one word, and that's idolatry, because if whether Q is the basis for it is human or non-human, right? Q's name isn't Jesus Christ. And my answer to all of this is Jesus is Lord, okay? So you got to make sure you keep your mind clear on this one, because I see a lot of people literally worshiping Q. And this is alarming, because if it's a person, This is just a person, all right?
Yeah.
If it's of God, then obviously recognizing Jesus Christ as the Lord is you're good to go, right? That's what you're good. You're fine there. But if Q is of the devil, which easily
At this point, easily.
Oh, this would be his MO.
Absolutely.
He always puts credible people. I
Absolutely.
mean, in the 9/11 community, there are a lot of very credible, quote unquote, leaders that are total COINTELPRO. They're actually counter agents
it's
working for our intelligence agencies.
so for me, if you were to ask me if Q is a force of good or a force of evil, I have no idea. The only thing I am 100% certain of is what's in the Bible. I trust that above anything else.
Smart man.
So it's like I'm kind of observing, but man, I don't know, man. It's just to me, and divulging information before the fact and then having it come to this is kind of it's throwing me for a little bit of a loop. Yeah, it provides credibility, but it's also leaking. And why? Why go through all this?
And that's
Why
my
is it-
concern as well.
Why is it necessary?
Because
to do
all of the
this?
things that are happening would be happening anyway. We just may not realize that, someone knew about them ahead of time, that they were planned like that, but they'd be happening anyway. And that's why my concern is that he's leaking stuff that's going to happen anyway that doesn't matter, because in the end, it's going to be the 17,000th thing that he says that's the deception.
Yeah, I'm just getting real suspicious of absolutely
I go back and forth.
everything.
Yeah.
And look, and even if there's now 40,000 indictments out there, and
Up
even
to 40,000 now.
Yeah, I think it's like 42,000.
even if they wipe out 42,000 people get arrested,
Come on,
that's still not. I mean, remember how big is this network? It's in the millions. So what's 42,000 people? It's nothing.
And there's going to be nobody on a high enough level.
It's
to
not
make
even
a
1%
difference.
of
They're pawns.
And we could easily be shown this circus, Roman circus, and we think we've knocked them out when actually it's a false sense of
Think
security.
about that for a second, though. 42,000 sealed indictments. I understand, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're talking about, sealed indictments.
Yep.
How long do you think it would take logistically to prosecute these out according to the Fourth Amendment? Meaning due process. I don't even know if that's even logistically possible in my
20
lifetime.
years?
In my lifetime.
Yeah.
Sure it is.
You think so?
Yeah.
It takes almost 4 years sometimes to even hear a murder trial for one person.
Well,
So
not all will go to trial. Most people are not going to go. They can't afford to go to trial.
It's just to me, it even seems that's even getting ballooned into the realm of unbelievable.
Well, there's still a high and I'm very serious about this, but there's a possibility that those indictments are really for people like us.
That's what I'm saying. Like, what are all? That's a lot. That's now approaching 40 times the maximum ever on record, which is 1,100 or something. Has been the most ever at one time.
Well, this is a good time to go into protocol number 6, the takeover technique. They're going to do it through monopolies. Quote, "We shall soon begin to establish huge monopolies, reservoirs of colossal riches, upon which even large fortunes of the Goyim will depend to such an extent that they will go to the bottom together with the credit of the states on the day after the political smash." I guess that's coming at some point. "You gentlemen here present who are economists, just strike an estimate of the significance of this combination. In every possible way, we must develop the significance of our super government by representing it as the protector and benefactor of all those who voluntarily submit to us. The aristocracy of the Goyim, as a political force, is dead. We need not take them into account. But as landed proprietors, they can still be harmful to us from the fact that they are self-sufficing in the resources upon which they live. It is essential, therefore, for us, at whatever cost, to deprive them of their land. This object will be best attained by increasing the burdens upon land property, i.e., taxes. And if they don't get someone off their land by financial hardship, We now have seen that they will send a military in like they did in the Bundy Ranch, and like there was a standoff somewhere in Utah a few years ago, literally armed citizens up against our own military. You don't see this on the news, but this is a big event that happened. This object will be best attained by increasing the burdens upon landed property in loading lands with debt. These measures will check land holding and keep it in a state of humble and unconditional submission. Now, what's funny is when this was first written, the United States didn't pay taxes. We were a self-funded government without taxing the people, and now what do we do? Now what are we doing? We don't send our money when we do our 1040s on April 15th. You think that money's going to the U.S. federal government? No, it is not. It is going to the private collection agency of these 300 private bankers. Now, the name of that collection agency has an official name. It's called the Internal Revenue Service. These are not federal employees. Did we know that? Most people don't. And they're a unit of the Federal Reserve, which is not federal. It is a private company. So these guys managed to pull it off, where we now send all of our money to them. They then decide how much of that money they're going to pass on to the U.S. Treasury, which goes into circulation in the U.S. And they have complete control over depressions. The 1929 depression was caused simply by retracting the money supply by 1/3. We've done some examples on what happens when the money supply gets squeezed, credit crunches. People start to do things like not be able to pay their taxes, so they lose their homes. This was a plan in 1900, which is absolutely played out. The monopolies. There used to be a law, FCC, Federal Communication Commission. Do you guys know that there used to be a law that no one person or one entity could own more than 25 broadcasting facilities? Period. There was a limit on that.
No.
Did you know that?
No.
That was there for our own protection, so that the media wouldn't do what it has ended up doing, which is literally subverting the truth completely. They do not, we now know they don't cover the truth. They're here to sell a story. They're not here to find the truth. That disappeared somewhere, not overnight, but in a gradient over the last 100 years. And now, they said, we're going to do it by we're going to take away little laws that were in their little protection. Same plan Hitler had. We're going to take away little rights one by one by one. They won't notice it. They won't see it. Now, when we were born into a country where if you were arrested, you were guaranteed a fair trial. You were guaranteed a phone call within 24 hours. You were guaranteed to have charges placed against you within 24 hours. They couldn't just keep you indefinitely in prison. You couldn't be tried in some secret tribunal court. But that is now the country we live in. You can be arrested indefinitely.
Obama did that in August, I want to say 2015.
Oh, he did that with so many people. It is, if people ever found out the truth of what Obama really did to this country, they will be ashamed.
Yeah, but isn't it, to be fair, isn't the tool that he used to do that the Patriot Act?
Yes.
That he had nothing to do with.
He signed lots of bills, and they were all pretty much taking our rights away.
Well, he also repealed
Yeah, but nothing took our rights away. Like
posse
the Patriot
comitatus. He so many of our due rights have been. He's taken the baton, which goes back to George Bush 1. And it goes back throughout history, but our rights have been eroded constantly. And now we're at the point where we are close to a banana republic where you can get thrown in prison for no reason and no one will ever hear about you again.
Yeah, just throw the word, just throw a word out there. Oh, I don't know, like domestic terrorist.
Oh, well, yeah,
that's it.
According to the Patriot Act,
That's
anyone... Now, and there's a very big difference here. I love my country.
Yeah.
But I question my government.
Sure.
And they're two very different things. When I'm questioning my government and who's in office right now, don't confuse that with my lack of love. It's because I love this country that I'm questioning it.
Right.
But if your loyalty is to the people holding the office and not to the office itself, you're effed up.
Yeah.
And this is not what the founding fathers wanted from us. Because in a sense, we're all practicing a little of that demagoguery, I think, that Howard was talking about. So now today, instead of one guy owning 25, being maxed at 25 broadcast facilities, we now have 5 people, 5 men that control close to 100,000 of them.
Wait, all of them.
Essentially all of them,
Yeah,
except for
yeah.
alternative media like ours.
Okay, fair enough.
And they do have some control over that because you mention Q and you're going to get murdered on YouTube. You know, search results in Google are manipulated so that you don't see this unless you got to look for it harder than ever. So we've allowed ourselves to do it because we're not paying attention. We're not paying attention to what's going on in the country like was ordained by it's a responsibility of every American. And all we are now is we are in the last stage of all republics. They said republics go through stages. We're in the pleasure seeking. We're the lazy ones. We haven't had to fight for anything. We're so sensitive. I mean, it's silly that my college, University of Michigan, has taught free speech safe zones. So people don't get their feelings hurt. You know what? My dad's generation, and this was my dad taught me, so I learned what his generation learned. He would be, he's rolling over in his grave because his friends that he went to high school with, some of them did storm the beaches at Normandy. His cousin David Cleary was a tank commander and was in the first unit that crossed the first bridge into the actual state of Germany. And he had friends in his class that died. But what have we become? And what did the protocols say earlier? We're going to throw so much garbage. We're going to have them parroting things like xenophobia and misogyny. Yeah. And they will do it because they're I'm speaking on the current topics of the day and I'm intelligent for understanding them. No, you are just parroting what someone on television has told you, and you have done nothing to verify whether it's true. You're just being led around by the nostrils.
That reminds me. It's a quote from Edmund Spencer.
Oh, ignorance.
There is a principle, which is a bar against all information, which is proof against all argument, and which cannot fail to keep man in everlasting ignorance. That principle is condemnation before investigation. And it just so happens to be, well, he echoed it, but that's
the cornerstone of ego.
That's a principle we find in the Bible as well.
And what does God say about having an ego?
Well, that
it can screw you over.
That talks about
it's not so good.
Pride, but he who answereth a matter before he heareth it, it is folly and shame unto him. That's written by Solomon. It's been around forever. Before you start running your mouth and getting all emotional about stuff and you don't even know what you're talking about, take a minute and really look into it. And what I think you'll find is on some of the biggest issues, you'll never find the real answer because you're just not inside these. You're not privy. You don't even have access. You're going to get bits and pieces, and most of it's laced with.
But like anything, if you study it long enough, you will be able to understand it. I mean, this is not an intelligence thing. You don't need like certain level of intelligence to see this. This is a psychological issue. And if someone's not willing to look at this, it's literally a psychological issue on their side. Now, they might not see it that way. They might believe in their hearts that they absolutely are right and we're not. But only one of those factions has probably spent 5,000 hours researching this type of thing. And I don't think we're researching a ghost. I mean,
yeah, right.
And it's not just, we're not the only station in the world talking about this. There's thousands of them.
Yeah.
What do you think's driving that? Are we all seeing the same mirage?
Well,
maybe we're all crazy.
If it's a mirage, then could we all see it at the same time?
Mass hallucination?
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah.
Protocol 7, worldwide wars. Now remember, these protocols, these are public now in 1903. Now, this is only 30 years after the letter from Albert Pike, which was in the British Museum, supposedly, although some historians say it was never there, and whoever said it was in 1926 was a conspiracy theorist, whatever. Same MO, I've heard it all before. But when credible people write in books in the 1920s, when one of them is a bishop of the Vatican, saying, I am telling you, I saw this letter written by Albert Pike to Giuseppe Mazzini, and they have a plan for 3 world wars, and this is written before World War I happens.
Yeah, at the very least, we can authenticate that it goes back before World War I, and the predictions are chilling with what's happened since then.
Yeah.
And even if you don't believe that we've seen the 1871 version, there is absolutely no doubt about the 1926 version, which, again,
Right.
talking about the 3 world wars. Now World War I has now passed.
Yeah.
And what they said they wanted to accomplish in that war, which was to throw over the czars, to bring in socialism under the name of communism, they did with the Bolshevik Revolution. And so in 1926, they still said there will be 2 more world wars. And they said the one that's coming up next is going to be between this socialist uprising in Europe, and it will ultimately lead to the creation of a Jewish state. And that sets the chess table up for the 3rd World War, which will be the Muslim world against this Jewish state.
Yes.
Now, how unbelievable is that?
Wow,
That is
wow.
absolutely unfolding. The Bible said it, and it's coming out of the internal documents that these people, because people have consciences. You get involved in this, you see what's going on. Some people do it on their deathbed, or
Yeah.
they let this out somehow, one way. So, worldwide wars.
So we got 5 minutes left to finish this protocol.
Here it is. The intensification of armaments, the increase of police forces are all essential for the completion of the aforementioned plans. Now we're on Protocol 7 here. What we have to get at is that there should be in all the states of the world, besides ourselves, only the masses of the proletariat. A few millionaires devoted to our interests, police and soldiers. Meaning the New World Order is going to be some aristocratic, some people that are on the good side, the side that they're going to be served. These are rich people that will keep the plan going because it fits their personal lifestyle. Then they will also need police and soldiers. Everyone else, I'm sorry to say, folks, will have one of 2 fates. You're either going to be killed because part of the plan is to depopulate the earth, or you will be a slave in their system. And their system is going to go live at some point. The Bible says it will. It'll be live for 3.5 years. And hopefully Q's not ushering this thing in. Anyhow, to continue on. So they're saying that once that day happens, where essentially the UN, I'm guessing, or the equivalent of, begins the day that it supersedes the U.S. government. And it's interesting because Kissinger was quoted on the New York Stock Exchange about 10 years ago saying that if UN troops rolled in to the United States right now or into Los Angeles, they would be met with, they would not be warmly greeted. However, and this is Kissinger saying, if there were a threat from outside this world, they would be happy that these UN troops were coming in. Again, another little hint of how they plan on doing this. Anyhow, to go back to the protocol. Throughout all of Europe, and by means of relations with Europe, and in other continents also, we must create firmaments, discords, and hostility. Therein we gain a double advantage. In the first place, we keep in check all countries, for they will know that we have the power, whenever we like, to create disorders or to restore order. And if you remember that Benjamin Disraeli quote, he's like, I don't just have to deal with other countries' politicians. I got to worry about the secret societies that are trying to undermine me constantly. Abraham Lincoln then said it. Now, Disraeli was the Prime Minister of England. Now, here you've got around the same time Abraham Lincoln, the President of the United States, saying, I have 2 great armies against me. One is the Confederates in the South, and one is the army of these international bankers. And the one I'm more afraid of, the bankers. These people have been around forever, and our presidents have told us. So if you don't know that, shame on you. You're the ignorant one at this point, my friends. In the first place, going back to the protocol, in the first place, we keep in check all countries, for they well know that we have the power whenever we like to create disorders or to restore order. All these countries are accustomed to see in us an indispensable force of coercion. In the second place, by our intrigues, we shall tangle up all the threads which have stretched into the cabinets of all states by means of the political, by economic treaties, or loan obligations. In order to succeed in this, we must use great cunning and penetration during negotiations and agreements. But, as regards to what is called the official language, we shall keep to the opposite tactics and assume the mask of honesty and compliancy. In this way, the peoples and governments of the Goyim, whom we have taught to look only at the outside, whatever we present to their notice, will still continue to accept us as the benefactors and saviors of the human race. So if you remember that financial example we did a year ago, the Federal Reserve. Right now, they control our monetary system. And all they have to do is, to create a depression like we had in 1929, all they have to do is just hold back a third of the money supply. Think what would happen if they held back half of it. What if they finally said, all this U.S. debt, time to pay up, folks. They could bankrupt our country instantaneously. And I was going somewhere with that, but whatever it was, we'll have to wait. All right, do we want to squeeze in? How late are we going tonight?
We need to wrap up right now.
Oh, we're wrapping up already?
Yeah, so I think we should continue this next week for
We
sure.
will. Let's continue
Yeah,
the
let's do
protocol.
that.
We are on Protocol 8.
I'm gonna read some of it.
Get familiar. It's creepy.
It is creepy.
It is a if you want to get creeped out, if you like horror movies, this one's a real one though, so you're gonna need some internal fortitude. But begin to understand, you can see what's going on modern day by looking at history. At the end of the day, why do we do this show? This is a rhetorical question, but someone throw out an answer.
Bring
To
people
awake
God.
and save others.
Wake people up, make you realize you are a pawn. You said it well. You're both a prize and a pawn in a spiritual war that has enormous, catastrophic, and even tragic potential consequences if you don't wake up to this. Find out who Jesus Christ is. Find out, when I say who, find out who he was, what his identity, and what it means to you. Because your feelings about Jesus Christ, your thoughts and beliefs about him, have everything to do with your eternal resting place. And I'm so sure of that I will elect to literally be beheaded if it comes down to it before I renounce that. Because he is the Lord and Savior. He's the only hope we've got. Q might have a little hope for man on earth, but our only real hope is in the Son of God. Find out who he is. That's all I've got to say this week. If anyone else has anything else, you can want to send us off.
Good. Come back next week and we'll discuss more
Protocol 8.
protocols.
All right. Have a good week.
See you next week.